Imagine waking up to the sound of sirens. Not the kind you hear from an ambulance or a fire truck, but air raid sirens. Outside your window, missiles are streaking across the sky. You grab your bag, maybe a photo album, your phone, anything you can carry. In that moment, the life you knew vanishes. This is not a movie. It's not a distant history lesson. For millions of Ukrainians, this has been their daily reality since February 24th, 2022, when Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And yet for those of us living far away from the front lines, it can feel abstract, like a headline we scroll past or a conflict that's someone else's problem. Today, I don't want to debate who's right or wrong. I want to invite you to something more meaningful, a conversation. A space where we can reflect together on what war means, not just for Ukraine, but for all of humanity. For justice, for peace, and for all of us in the world that's more connected than ever. I've spent time diving into this conflict, not just its political roots, but also the voices of people impacted, their stories, their fears, and their resilience. So let's take the time to explore this together through three lenses: the background and causes of the war, the human and global consequences, and the role of international response and what it means for us. To understand the current war, we need to rewind a bit. Ukraine and Russia share a long, complicated history. For centuries, their identities have been entangled through empire, conflict, and control. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Ukraine became independent, but independence didn't mean peace. In 2014, Russia annexed Crimea, a peninsula of Ukraine. That move shocked the world. Russian troops entered the region under the pretense of protecting Russian-speaking citizens. Ukraine called it an invasion. The West imposed sanctions. But it didn't end there. Fast forward to 2022, Russia's President Vladimir Putin justified the full-scale invasion by saying Ukraine's closest to NATO posed a threat. He also made the cultural claims suggesting Ukraine was not a real country, but a larger part of Russian identity. But the political analysts from BBC News and Atlantic point to a deeper motive: power. Ukraine's desire to join the European Union and NATO represented a threat to Russia's influence. And for Putin, it was a moment to assert dominance, not just over Ukraine, but to send a message to the West. This war is about land, but it's also about identity, democracy, and control. While governments strategize, everyday people suffer. Since the invasion, more than 14 million Ukrainians have fled their homes, many of them women and children. According to the United Nations Refugee Agency, the refugee crisis is the largest in Europe since World War II. NPR has shared dozens of first-hand accounts from families torn apart. One story that stood out to me was from a mother named Irina. She fled with her 2 children, leaving behind her husband who stayed to fight. She described riding a packed train for over 30 hours, holding onto her children while explosions lit up the horizon behind them. She said, "I don't know if we'll ever go back. I just want my children to feel safe again." Beyond the physical destruction, there's invisible damage. Trauma. Children growing up with fear instead of freedom. Seniors reliving the Soviet era they thought they'd escaped. Russian citizens facing censorship, misinformation, or punishments if they protest. War isn't just fought with bullets. It's waged on minds, on hearts, on futures. This war may be happening in Ukraine, but its effects circle across the globe. One of the most immediate impacts has been on the global economy. Russia is a major supplier of gas. Ukraine is one of the world's largest exporters of grain. With ports blocked and supply chains disrupted, we've seen energy crises in Europe and food shortages in countries that rely on Ukrainian wheat. In places like Somalia and Yemen, the ripple effects of the war are causing hunger. In Germany, gas prices soared. In the US, inflation increased. It's also changed political alliances. NATO, once seen by some as outdated, has been revitalized. Countries such as Finland and Sweden, who were neutral for the longest time, have now joined. Tensions with Russia are at Cold War levels again. But one of the most dangerous consequences is the rise of disinformation and cyber warfare. The Brookings Institution and Atlantic have reported on how propaganda has been weaponized, both in Russia and globally. Narratives are being shaped not just by bombs, but by algorithms. We are not immune to this conflict. Whether we feel it at the gas pump, in our social media feeds, or through the fears of a new global war, we are part of this story too. The global response has been mixed, powerful, yet imperfect. The US and the EU have sent aid, military equipment, and billions of dollars to support Ukraine. Sanctions on Russia have hit its economy hard, and many nations have opened their borders to refugees. But there are limits. No country wants direct war with Russia, a nuclear power. That means military support has its bounds. Sanctions take time and often hurt ordinary people more than political leaders. This war is not just Ukraine's strategy, it's the world's test. A test of our empathy, of our values,
1 minute.
of our ability to see beyond borders and ask, what kind of world do we want to live in? War is complex, there are no easy answers, but I believe real, thoughtful human dialogue is where we begin. Because when we talk, we understand. When we understand, we care. And when we care, we act not out of fear, but out of hope. So here are a few questions to start off a conversation and really get you thinking. How far should nations go to support other countries in conflict? Is military aid ethical or risky? How might media coverage and public interest differ if this war were in another part of the world? Do you believe peace is possible in this conflict? And what might it realistically take? How has the media shaped your understanding of the war in Ukraine? Do you feel fully informed?